Hai, good day to all. Salam Malaysia Madani, salam anak yang baik lagi cerdik. Thank you very much for joining us today in our Bedah Buku IPG KBA. This program is hosted by IPG KBA's Resource Centre. I'm Dr. Selvanayagi, and with me I have our speaker, Mr. Liew Nyok Lin. He started his career in 1991 as an English language teacher and pursued his education in France. He is currently serving as the head of international department in IPG KBA. Besides commitments to teaching French language programs and managing the department, he is also in charge of quality management portfolio in IPG KBA. He has 32 years of experience teaching. In 2021, he received the nomination from the French government. He received the award for Chevalier des Palmes Academics. His interests are in French language and culture, gastronomy, and quality management system for education. He is not only interested in education, but also dabbles with entomology, being an amateur in Lepidoptera sciences, where he regularly contributes articles on Malayan butterflies. Unfortunately, today he is not going to share about butterflies with us, but he has brought a book along for us to share in this session. We are going to look into culturally proficient inclusive schools. This book was written by Dolores Lindsay, Jacqueline Townsend, Cynthia Ju, and Lori Plofsky. In this book, there are 10 chapters. The part 1 is all about how we can get commitment to all. In part 2 is becoming inclusive through 5 elements, which he will be sharing with us in a while. This is a very interesting book which makes us think how we should look at our students. Yes, it is true that we no more have one size fits all. But here in this book, it reasons out why we should have tailor-made education. The adapting, the adopting, the differentiation on teaching and learning. Well, I don't want to steal the show now. So to Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu, welcome to the program. Perhaps you would like to say more of yourself before we look into the book.
Good morning to all. Salam sejahtera dan salam madani. Okay, a bit about myself. Besides what Dr. Selva has just mentioned earlier, I also, besides teaching French, also teach education paper on and off in the campus. And we did also touch on inclusive education in our EDUP papers. So what is interesting about the book, the first thing that actually attracted me about this book is the title of the book itself, Culturally Proficient Inclusive Schools. Now, if you look at the the context of today's teaching and learning, the word inclusive has become a mainstream idea. It's become a very important jargon because teachers are grappling today with multitude of challenges coming from all directions. It's not just about managing the classroom and delivering the curriculum that has been prescribed. We are also dealing with the era of globalization that filtered into the classroom, where everything that we do can be viral. There is a lot of me notion of what people want, so it's no longer a prescribed one size fits all scenario that we used to have, but now we are faced with every minute detail from everybody, and the teacher is forced to address all these issues. So I think this book comes at a very timely manner, because it does actually address all these issues. Okay, and the second thing I think that attracted me to this book is the term culturally proficient, because it's we used to think, I mean, we normally, when we talk about inclusive schools, we are not that inclined to think about culture, but rather we tend to focus a lot on disability, the pedagogy of addressing challenged students, be it cognitively or psychologically. So now the word culturally brings the scope to a much larger spectrum that we will discuss in a bit more. So basically, these are the two core ideas in the book that actually made me choose this book. I think it's a very timely book.
Yes, you are very right. This is a book where, when I read about the book, it talks a lot about culture. And in our Malaysian education system itself, we have a lot of multicultural students who are in the system now, especially with the globalization of the country, the kind of workers we have, people who come in. So it is true that what we read in this book, it is not inclusive only pedagogically or the challenged children, but also culturally we are kind of challenged. And we have a lot of cultures where we have to know the culture of the children before we can start the education. Okay, with that, in your opinion, what is culturally inclusive in the book, and to what extent can we apply this in the Malaysian context?
Okay. First of all, I think it's true what you remarked earlier, that about the context in Malaysia. We are basically living in a very culturally
Globalized.
heterogeneous society that is globalized, but is that reflected in our education system? So these are the questions that we can ask ourselves when we walk into our classrooms. Now, I think to structurally go further into this notion, we look at the two words that I mentioned earlier: culturally proficient, inclusive schools. Now, actually, there are two underlining notions inside this title. I think we start with the term inclusive schools or inclusive education. Now, if we look at inclusive education, we first have to point out what is not inclusive education, which we tend to practice. The first thing is mainstreaming. Now, if you look at current practices that we actually do in our schools, one of the things that we see is mainstreaming. Now, there are two ways to look at it. There are mainstreaming in the sense that we actually we streamline students according to their capacities, okay, to their capabilities, in cognitive capabilities mostly. So we also have mainstreaming in a sense where we now have inclusive schools, where we do include learners. Okay, let's use the term learners, with from mild to moderate learning disability into the classroom, with the notion that we are mainstreaming inclusivity into our system. Now, if you read this book, both of these are not, uh, uh, sadly, are not inclusive education. All right. So another thing, integration is also not inclusive education. What is integration? When we look at laws, education laws all over the world in all countries, what education law does is to prescribe a fixed model of education, one size fits all for everybody. So now that is anything but inclusivity, because normally laws are made on a common conception of commonality for the greater majority of the society. So you will systematically, you might sideline or marginalize smaller subcultural groups or smaller communities that do not fit into the commonality of the larger ideology of the society. So that itself is exclusivity and is not part of the inclusive education. So prescribing law or educational enactment is not inclusive education. So what is inclusive education? So if we ask those questions, then what is? So according to this book incidentally is written in the context of the American education system. So our discussion, we will kind of put it in context where we stand in terms of ourselves here in Malaysia. So what is, according to this book, inclusive education? First of all, it is legal. Why is it legal? The American Public Law 94 142, promulgated in 1975, says that every child, irrespective of their background, needs to have full access to education and to learning. So if you have a law that is inclusive, taking into account all the different subcultural group, communities, and minorities in that country, you have a more inclusive notion, or I would say rather vision, of what education entails. Secondly, what is inclusive education? And inclusive education is something that is visionary, pragmatic. Why is it visionary? Because we are putting into an assumption that everyone has the same equal access, irrespective of their background, to the same quality education that make us functional in the society that we live in. Okay. It also provides every learner with the opportunity to learn and practice independence, because at the core of it, education is to enable a person to function, to make independent judgment and how would I say, self-advocacy, so that you become a functional member of the society. And for you to have a self-determination is choice. So education allow us to make informed choices for ourselves. So this is where a more visionary and pragmatic approach to education will eventually lead to a more how would I say, pragmatic outcome for receiving an education. All right. And also, what is a inclusive education? Inclusive education is also the practice of adjusting, assessing the curriculum or the package of the curriculum that we use for delivering content, delivering education to our community, because we all know that the world is not a static entity. We move, we change, it is dynamic. There is always at certain point there will be paradigm shifts. So if a curriculum is rigid, the problem will be that it will actually create marginalized pockets of gaps, learning gaps, and itself be the problem of inclusivity. So those are the things that we need to look at. And also, what is inclusive is also a journey. So education must be a journey. It's not something that we prescribe today and we say, oh, we change the idea of inclusivity. It needs to be inclusive of all the culture, and on the dot we change everything. It is not that. It is also about a journey that we take to arrive at a point with strategic measures. I think basically that is what the book is trying to advocate. Okay.
Yeah. In this book also, and also what you have discussed, Liu, just now, it says that including or having inclusive in our education, it is kind of making the whole system very fluid. So it all depends on the teachers, on how they
Yes.
are going to make the changes, how they are going to adapt themselves into having this inclusive, culturally inclusive education. Okay, going back to another question. Do you think is knowing the culture important in our teaching, be it the normal children or the disabled children, or it can be academically or physically challenged children? Do you think that knowing their culture, their background is important in our teaching, or we should just close that and just look at their physical challenges?
Okay, to answer this question, I think we go back to the notion of what is culturally proficient. Okay, being culturally proficient is the manner which cultural assets from the basis and core value is used to guide educators to, towards an inclusive classroom, and also inclusive approach to delivering education. So in that sense, I think most of us here in Malaysia, we do have that experience of at one time or another in our learning, we felt left out in the system because there are just things that doesn't match with our expectation. Every child, irrespective of what background that they come from, they have a specific how would I say belief and value that is intrinsically linked to their culture, their cultural background, and it actually affects your modus operandi,
Yes.
how you react to things. So now, if the teacher in the classroom only work on perceived disabilities and not looking into the cultural background, the larger cultural background demography of the classroom, now what the teacher has neglected is that the teacher has not taken into account the different needs beside
Teaching.
now the current standing that we have inclusive classroom with handicapped children, so we are addressing that also, and at the same time we are just doing our normal teaching as usual per se for the other learners. So now that actually it's like doing things halfway, but we are not actually addressing the full picture. There's an elephant in the room and we can't see. So I think cultural background has to be taken into account on what the teacher does in the classroom, because nowadays if you look at the problem that there's a lot of things coming out into the news, going viral, teachers having problem in the classroom. Why? These are actually cultural clashes.
Yes.
Faux pas that we do in the classroom because we thought what we say is correct because we are brought up that way, but it might not be true for the audience that you have in front of you. So not taking those into account, we are actually exposing ourselves into even more greater problems later on.
Yeah, I believe in knowing the culture is very important. For example, if a teacher is teaching in, this is just an example, yeah, a teacher is teaching in a Chinese school where they will have a lot of activities given to the student to take it back home and get it done. And now we have a lot of other races going into the Chinese school, and the other races, when we look at them, that like for our Muslim friends, okay, the children will have to go to their religious class after the tazkirah and whatever it is after the school session. So their culture is different, and they will not be able to finish the amount of homework given to them. So the teachers, in this sense, okay, I feel that they should know the students culturally, they should know their background better for us to give them a way of adjusting into the system itself. So so I feel that is very, very important.
Yes.
And also for disabled children, it is differentiation. Differentiation is another aspect where I would look at, because we have differentiation by the process, we have differentiation by the product. So how are we going to handle this learning children with learning disability? That is another problem we are supposed to look at. Okay. And also in this book, when I was reading it, in chapter 5, I read about universal design for learning. How do we, in this large prescribed syllabus, we have a prescribed design for teaching. How do we go about this universal design for learning?
Okay, that's also another interesting point. An interesting point to look for in the book is the universal design for learning. Now, this is actually in chapter 8, where we talk about how to manage changes for the classroom. So basically, every teacher would have already understood design for learning. You know, your usual lesson planning and semester planning is actually designed for learning. Now, what it actually meant here, universal design of learning in the context of this book, is that we try to have a learning package that minimize the requirement for modification when you use it. That having said, it means when you do your semester planning, when you do your lesson planning, your weekly lesson planning, you have already taken into account all the needs of your audience. So basically all your students. Now, how do we go about it? Okay, so basically, I think these are notions that all educators would know, but maybe we are just not too aware. One of it is differentiating instruction. Okay, so now if you have if you have an inclusive classroom or inclusive school, differentiation is not just about from the cognitively. You have groups where you address cognitive needs, so you have a stronger those that perform. You have the same activity for those in the middle group and the the usual 3 group division, but you also have at the same time activities that you plan that also address physical needs, that also apply to learning needs. So that's where all your multi-sensorial
The multiple
needs, the
intelligence.
multiple intelligence come in. You also have needs where you need to address certain learning disability that you would need to enhance. So I think we are living in an era today where we do have the tools ready-made for us that you can freshly plug from the internet that will help to make this much more meaningful, I think, compared to say maybe 30 years ago, where technology is still very limited in this sense, of what we can do in the classroom. So yeah, that is one of it. So the universal learning design for learning. Okay, what is it? So there are 2 things. The first thing is retrofit. So retrofit is a very interesting notion because it's from architecture. So what is retrofit? For example, when you buy an apartment, you don't like the design. What do you do with the apartment? You ask an architect to come, redraw a plan, you refit,
Redesign
you
it.
redesign and you refit your apartment so that you can have the rooms that you want, the functionality that you want. So same thing with the curriculum. I think nowadays the teachers they carry out a new pedagogy of deep learning in the classroom,
Yes.
where you do backward design. So basically, the retrofit is backward design. So you go back to looking at what is prescribed to you, and you make adjustment to fit into whatever that you need in the classroom. So basically, that is retrofit. So it's not an alien notion that nobody knows about. All right. Then the second one, of course, ideally we would like to have a curriculum that is more fluid, that takes into account all the the entire spectrum of learners that we have. So now, how do we go about that? So you have, of course, I think the key ingredient is planning and implementation. So it
Yes.
comes to planning. So when it comes to planning, of course, you already have, I think in most cases in any country in the world, you already have a prescribed a national curriculum. Is more like a framework. So now that doesn't mean the teacher can't modify or can't adjust it to the needs of the classroom. So what do you do? I think the book comes up with 4 points that you can work on. Basically, how when you are planning, okay. First of all, I think that an interesting thing to do is to have a fact sheet about your learners. So how do we do a fact sheet for learners? Of course, the teacher has access to the students' profile. You have access to their performance record. You have access to their cultural background from the profile. You have access to their um, other range of capabilities. For example, if they're good in art, if they're good in maths, if they're good in, so all this is at the disposition of the teacher. So the first thing is that the key ingredient is the student's profile, the learner's profile is already at the disposition of the teacher. So that part is important. Just like any other step that we do when you design a curriculum, you do a needs analysis. So this is basically a needs analysis for the teacher. So how many percentage of learners I have that need a specific attention on a specific area of learning. So that having said, you can align this to the curriculum. So like I said just now, there's a bit of a retrofitting going on in a more micro manner, because now you have the information of the learners and you have the greater curriculum with you, and the greater framework of the curriculum will not change instantly, but what can change is the teacher's approach. So this is where the fitting will happen, and this is where the backward design will happen. So that is one thing, and that will directly lead to the second point, which is the content demand. Okay, so the content demand, it will be basically, what are you going to deliver? What are you going to deliver? So that's where you get all these requirement earlier on when you look at all the profile of your learner, and you need to manage the type of resources that you have. Like I said earlier on, we are very lucky that today we live in a world where there are many technological advancements that allow us to make adjustment accordingly, and I don't see why we need to exclude learners in a classroom just because it is too troublesome to plan an experience that will also benefit those that are being at a disadvantage in the classroom.
Yes.
So,
Okay, that's the thing, Mr. Liu. We believe that every child has the right to education, be it the child who is very weak in his studies, be it a child who has got disability. But we feel that every child who sits in the classroom has got the right for education. So, like what we are looking at, like we may say that yes, we have all the facts, we have everything about the child, but we have to understand that our classrooms are also big in Malaysian context. Our classrooms are also very big. How are we going to adjust to this? How are we going to liquefy our teaching and learning in the classroom and tailor make it for each child? Okay, that also, when we look at the case study from the book, there are a lot of case studies here. It needs the parents to come and help.
yes.
A lot of family help is there. So now I think we have to change kind of our perception. Okay, we need parents to come into the school so we can have remedial instruction for them, and we can have, if we are having differentiation, then it has to be the whole classroom. We have different process and product and so on. But if we are going to do remedial, it is just a small group where we can tailor make for them. But like what the case study I have read here, it is the parents who should come in and they should help out in our teaching and learning. So with that, another question. How do we as teachers manage the dynamic change in this whole scenario?
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, I think first of all, I will address the part about uh, involving parents.
Yes.
Now, I think currently all the schools are undergoing the TS25 programs.
Yeah.
So the word engagement would be the keyword today to engage parents into the classroom.
True. True.
So I think this is also where the school as an institution plays a very important part in inclusivity, because we have to step out of the box from how we think inclusivity works. So schools as a social institution, as a social organization, needs to address the communities that it serves. So in the
Yes.
planning of learning experience, or I would say learning package, I think the TS25 program allows the school to reach out to the community and to engage parents, to engage companies, to engage NGOs, to come into the classroom and make learning more meaningful, I think, for the learners in the school. So that is one thing that we can, as an organization, I think schools, and today we are given that autonomy, I think schools, thanks to the TS25 program. So this is one way to look at it, how we can reach out into the school. Now, second thing, for the teacher, in terms of managing the dynamics in the classroom, when it comes to all these sub-marginalized groups that are now mainstream into our normal classroom. Okay, so how would a teacher go about it? Now, if you look at this book, okay, they have a more ideal situation because they have a teacher assistant, and that doesn't mean we can't go that direction. Now, I know that currently we are having a lot of gaps in terms of manpower because of our way to address the delivery of the curriculum. We tend to train a lot of specialized teachers, which of course entail a lot of manpower. You see, I think basically in the Western world, the teachers are mostly generalists. So they address the entire spectrum of the classroom except a certain specialized classes. So I'm not telling that the ministry should go to that direction. What I imply here is that back to the TS25 thing, the teacher and of course I think the school authority need to look at how we can engage the community to, I won't say serve the school, but to function together with the school as a learning institution for the society that it serves, because being part of the society makes it even more meaningful. So that is something which we can look into, because parents come in all shapes and size and capacity. So we, instead of looking at the differences, we should look at the strength that each parent, which we will now address as co-teacher, that can contribute to the classroom. I think that is something which you need to look into seriously, and how to manage this kind of learning gap in the classroom.
Yeah. So I think that we should educate the parents, okay, that we do have this where we look at the society, we look at the CSR by other companies, or we have parents coming into the school. We look at the initiative started for English language under the highly immersive program. Okay, inclusive and immersive, it comes together because during the highly immersive program, we get everybody to come in to help. Okay, and if the students are not successful, we move into remedial instruction for those students. So here we are including, we are looking at each child, how we can help the child to develop themselves. Even in our IPGs, we do have inclusive education to expose our teachers, our trainee teachers, on what they can do when they go out there. All right. Okay. Now, with this, your opinion on how can we manage the challenged students in an inclusive classroom itself. What can we do
Okay.
with them?
I think one of the things that we can do to manage the inclusive students, learners in the classroom, is to redefine the role of the teacher. Now, traditionally, there would be a certain role attributed to the teacher, or in a sense, we should use the word educator in the classroom. With a more diversified portfolio in a classroom now, we should look at what a teacher can do and what are the limits of a teacher. So this is when you need to, I think the teacher or the school authority needs to redistribute responsibilities, I think according to the strength of each of the staff that you have in a classroom. So the notion of co-teaching comes back again to managing learning disability, because it is not just about one teacher handling the entire spectrum. Now it's like a jigsaw puzzle. We bring in other staff members who would fit into the missing pieces in the classroom. So in order to do that, I think the school authority need to come up with an instrument whereby you need to map the strength of each of the personnel and what they can do and what are the limitations. And that way, when you look at the profile of the class and you know that there are certain gaps that need to be addressed, you try to fit in the jigsaw with the missing pieces. So that is one way to look into it, how we manage the learning disability. Because I can understand we have very big classrooms in Malaysia. You know, a teacher is faced with, I don't know, 35, 40 students simultaneously. All it takes is just 3 to 4 learners with disability, even mild ADHD, you know, is enough to disrupt the whole learning cycle, you know. So I think we have to really look back into how we can manage the generality of learning as a whole, and how we can make full use of the resources that we have in the school and also the community around it. Because if we continuously to work the way that we are working currently, I think this issue will never be resolved in the classroom, I think.
Yeah, it will create a burnout among the teachers.
Yes.
If you have any questions, please type the questions on the chat box so we can address the questions, or we can discuss the questions. So just let us know what is your opinion. You can let us know what you would like to know more about this inclusive education. We can generally talk about that. So I hope you will just type out your questions so that we can answer your questions. Okay, back to Mr. Liu. In this sense, Mr. Liu, do you think that there should be a change? Because change is always inevitable. We cannot run away from change. So do you think there should be a change in the system? Do you think there should be a change in the teachers, especially individually?
I think at the core of it, I think the first change that need to happen in our approach to education is the pedagogy. I think that is basically what we need to change. I mean, the theories are there, you know. Basically, it works across the era. What needs to change is how we look at our client, which is basically our learners in the classroom. And we can no longer sustain a quality education using our approach that was, I think, is basically quite outdated, where we prescribe one lesson plan with one single track of activity.
True.
For every child in the classroom. I think basically the core of it, we need to change that approach first.
Yeah. So in that sense also, we should stop looking at what we say that I should finish the syllabus.
Yes.
Okay, because we have this saying by most of the teachers. Most of them will, when we ask them what happened, they say, oh no, I have no time for this because I got to finish the syllabus. So do you think that we should have a more fluid syllabus where the teachers are given the authority to make changes according to the students' ability?
Yes, I think, like I said, there are two steps. The first step is basically we need to change the core capacity or upscaling the teachers so that they can, on a second step or second phase, deal with a fluid curriculum. I think one of the reasons why we have such a rigid curriculum is that there is always this fear of the person who carries out the curriculum not able to design a fluid learning package in the classroom. So hence, we have a tendency to design curriculum that is very detailed and very rigid. So now if you have upscaling happening at the teachers level, the educators level, then you are given an opportunity to come up with a curriculum that is a lot more fluid, that allows on as an outcome a more I would say a more holistic, I think, learning package that the teacher can work with in the classroom. So I think it goes both ways. I think both of it needs to happen in order for us to actually really have inclusive education, I think.
Yeah, in Malaysia, we have a national curriculum. Okay, it goes across the board. But in countries like US and Finland and this kind of countries, their curriculum is according to the district.
Yes.
So the district will come up with a curriculum, and it is up to the teachers how they want to make changes in the curriculum. So I think that helps in a more inclusiveness in the school, in the education, compared to what we have.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Would you like to add anything else?
Yes, I think what we just discussed, the upscaling and also the change in approach to curriculum, also needs to englobe assessment. You see how the final assessment is going to, the format of the final assessment actually format how the teacher will teach. So this is something which we need to look into. If I did my first degree and my master's in France. When we were there, we look at how they look at their, the entire cycle of learning. There's only one public exam, the baccalaureate.
Okay.
And then you go to the university, So it doesn't entail a syllabus chasing.
True.
Because it's the teacher in the classroom has the autonomy to decide where the learner can move forward to the next level or need to stay back for remedial. So this is something which we need to look back into, how we look at learning per se, I think, in context of what we are doing.
True.
Now.
Like now that we have done away with most of our major exams, like year 6, we don't have the UPSR, and for PMR, we don't have a major exam. I think like teachers should move into that direction where they teach according to the child's need. So look at the child's strength and get back to whatever the child needs, the gaps, like what you said just now. Look at the child, the gap, and fill in the gap for the child. So in that way, I think whatever we are doing in the school will help every child, or in fact, it's kind of a tailor-made syllabus, a tailor-made teaching for all these children.
Yes, okay? I totally agree with that.
All right.
So there's something which is a long journey. I think we need to work on that. So I think, like I said earlier, the basic ingredient, I think basically we need to do upscaling for our educators, and from there onward, we will be able to move forward and change the scenario.
Yeah, that is very, very true. Okay, that was an interesting discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, so we can conclude that as teachers, we must be aware that there are barriers. Okay, there are barriers in the race, there are barriers in our ethnicity, there are barriers of age, gender, and also the perceived ability of each child. So we as teachers, we have to overcome all these things, and we must be aware of the change. There must be some kind of awareness to change, and know what the student is interested in. Individualized educational program. For example, we can have differentiation, and under the big umbrella of differentiation, we will have remedial instruction for the students. So I know it is a bit difficult for teachers, especially when we have 30 to 40 in a classroom. but we try our best to tailor make our classes. And also another point which I would like to conclude is there must be a universal design for learning, that we take all students into consideration. Okay, we look at the curriculum product, which is the assessment, like what Mr. Liu was just sharing with us. There should be an assessment, and the process where we have the instruction. How do we go about teaching the students? Okay, what level are we going to look at? And also another point which we discussed just now was the multiple intelligence. Okay, we should look at the multiple intelligence of the child before we start teaching. For example, in the primary school, Mr. Liu, the children love to move around. So if we can have activities which are kinesthetic, which you make them move and learn, so that is how we are looking at multiple intelligence. And the other one we were talking about retrofit, the retrofit is as teachers, we make kind of adjustments to fit for everyone. Okay, the syllabus has to be good enough, or the teacher has to be good enough to make the kind of changes to teach according to the situation. Okay, with this, I would like to thank all for being with us. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Liu, for the wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
And to all, have a great weekend. Thank you very much. See you all in the next session.
Thank you.